Hey, good morning, guys. It is Saturday. We got college game day on in the background here to keep us occupied while we get our hands dirty. Today, I'm going to do some more work on the E46. If you haven't seen, Rio Toro and I are going to give away this E46 convertible once I'm done doing some work on it. ECS Tuning has hooked me up with a big kit to do the inspection too, but I also got a big gasket from them. So we're going to be doing the valve cover gasket as well as spark plugs. The only tools we're going to need for this job is a 10mm socket. You're going to want a 16mm, either just a long thin socket or a spark plug socket, a little flathead screwdriver, a torque wrench, some kind of ratchet, the spark plugs to replace, and a T30, and that's it. So since both of these jobs require a lot of the same steps, I'm gonna do that both at the same time on this car, but I'm gonna split it into two different videos so you can watch whichever one you are doing. Right now, you are watching the spark plug job. Subscribe to the channel, hit that little bell notification on the bottom, and you'll be notified when these new videos come out. Guys, all of these are easy maintenance that anybody can do. This is my first time doing them, and I'm gonna show you how to do it step by step. First thing we're gonna do is get this assembly out of the way. That houses your cabin filter. It's really simple. There are three little things here that you just do a quarter turn, and then this lifts right out. Sometimes if it's old, the top part will be stuck to it a little bit. Shake that off, and as you can see, mine was just replaced. Go ahead and take the filter out. Now there are 4 T30s back in here that you're gonna remove. Now we have this little wiring harness, and you can see that there are these little clips on here. You just unclip them. Be careful because it's probably brittle plastic. Just unclip all 4 and that will open, and you can gently remove these. So once those 2 lines are removed, this thing will just lift out and come out of the car. Ooh, the thing's actually kind of heavy. So just a tip for the projects that I do, I like to put the hardware and then parts that I remove in order along the wall. So when I'm putting it all back together, I just go in reverse order. Now we're gonna remove this cover here. So it requires you popping off these little caps. So you just gently remove them with a little flathead screwdriver. And then there's a little 10mm bolt in here. It comes off, it's got a little washer on it, and then there's another one in the back. With those removed, the cover just lifts off. Now the other engine cover is pretty much the same. 2 caps, 2 10mm bolts. Except on this side, it's just the nut with a built-in washer that's gonna come off. Try not to drop them down into the engine bay. And then just remove the fill cap, and this one will lift off. And then go ahead and put the fill cap back on so you don't get anything dropped down there. All right, so we already have the coils exposed here, so we're gonna start with the one closest to us and remove it. It just has 2 10mm bolts, one on each side, that we're just gonna remove. Take the bolts out all the way. They also have washers that are attached to the bolts. And you can see that that first bolt that we removed, there's also a ground wire attached to it. So when we're reassembling, don't forget your ground wire here. Then for the metal clip here, you're just gonna lift it straight up and then disconnect the black wiring harness that comes into it just by pulling it straight out the back like that. Now your coil, you can just pull straight up. It's got a little bit of suction on it. Okay, so it'll pop out like that. It'll probably give you a good pop because the end of your spark plug is seated inside this little rubber piece. So it's got a little grip on there. Now, I'm not gonna be replacing these. If you are, you don't have to worry about this step, but I just like to mark them when I take them out, so I make sure I put them in the same place. So let's go through and label them 1 through 6. So now when I reinstall, I can get them in the same spots. So our next step is we're going to remove the spark plug and replace it with one of these. This is the correct one for your E46. BKR6EQUP 3199 is the number. If you don't have those already, stop now, go to ECS Tuning, get the right ones. But here is what the spark plug looks like. Now, most of my other cars, I have a 14 millimeter thin wall spark plug socket, they call it. So there's a little piece of rubber at the bottom that goes over this and grabs onto it to help you remove it. But to make sure you have the right tool for your spark plugs, all you gotta do is take a new one out. See that rubber gripped on it. But these are 16 millimeter, not 14 millimeter. So for these spark plugs, I just have a long, pretty thin 16 millimeter socket that is gonna go over that. And you do need a long one, or because these are long, if you use a short socket, it's not gonna fit over there. And since this is not a spark plug socket, it doesn't have the nice little rubber grippy thing to grab it. So I'm just gonna use a magnet, because this is magnetic, to pull that thing out. So just hook this thing up to an extension and a ratchet. You don't wanna use power tools for this because usually it's an aluminum block and you don't wanna strip it. They're usually in there pretty tight, so it takes a good bit of force to get it started, but then it comes right out. And sadly, since I just moved into my new garage, I don't know where my magnetic tool is. So I'm just gonna use my spark plug socket that is the wrong size. It's got enough grip to grab it and pull it out for me. Yeah, this is what an old spark plug is gonna look like. So side by side with our new one, you can see how oily and dirty it is. Before I put the spark plug back in, there's a couple things I like to do. You saw how crusty that thing was, so chances are there's a little bits of crap that might have fallen in there, so I'm gonna vacuum this out. Actually, that's a step I forgot. Before I even take these off, I like to vacuum around here just to get any dirt and leaves and stuff out of the way that could potentially fall in. All right, about gapping, these come pre-gapped and there is no way to gap these, so they're ready to go. You don't have to worry about that. Some people put anti-seize on the threads. BMW says not to do that. And the reason you don't do that is because it affects the torque. If you use a torque wrench to torque it to their specs, which is 30 Newton meters or 22 foot-pounds, you're going to torque it too much because it's going to make it slippery and slide easier than it should. And you just don't need them. You saw how old that nasty one was that I took out. Came out pretty easy, no need for anti-seize. But what is important is to start these things by hand. So I'm just going to gently drop that in there and use this. And by hand, I'm gonna start threading it because cross threading is a big no-no. Bad things will happen. So you can feel that it's going in really easily. So I'm just gonna hand tighten it until it gets all the way tight. At which point I'm gonna snap my torque wrench on here and I'm gonna go to 22 foot-pounds. All right, it is in. So on the E46, these can all be done independently, so I can just replace this coil, and in that case, there's actually really no need to mark them if you're not gonna have them all out at the same time, but if you are, it's nice to do. So you can just drop it back in. Just make sure your ground cable is on top of this thing, and you're gonna press it back in, and you should feel it kind of snug there on your spark plug. Make sure this metal bracket is still up. Reattach the cable down there, snap it back down into place, and you are all locked in. Ooh, you can see why I need to clean this up a little bit. And just drop your 2 bolts back in here. Hand tighten those at first. And they don't need to be on there that tight. They're just holding this down. So now you go ahead and do the other 5, all exactly the same way. So I've changed spark plugs on several cars, and this is by far the easiest car that I've ever done it on. There is a ton of room to work with in there. You don't need a lot of tools, and it's a very satisfying job knowing you did it yourself and saved a lot of money. Finish quickly, Sports Center is still on, so I'm gonna go enjoy some college football. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next project.